Hello everyone and welcome along to the Celtic Down Under Tuesday Crew podcast. I'm your host for tonight, Stephen. Joining me are also Willie, Mac and Steve. Guys, it's all aboard the Brendan bus as the prodigal son returns in an act of biblical significance for the faithful. So how are we feeling 24 hours out from the official announcement? Are we feeling excited, relieved, angry or just ambivalent? I'll go to you first, Willie.
I'm feeling happy that the manager search is over. It's been dealt with pretty swiftly. I mean, is it 12 days between Ange leaving and Brendan being appointed? It's quite a quick turnaround. I'm pleased we've got a top-level manager appointed. I'm also pleased that Europe's been put to the front and centre of what they were looking for and their ambitions. I'm intrigued to see the first media conference from the new manager. And Brendan Rodgers is our new manager, and we need to sort of get behind him and move forward and do what's best for the club.
Yeah, what about yourself, Mac? How are you feeling 24 hours out from the big reveal?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say. So the different options we were looking at were things like, are you excited about it? I wouldn't say excited, but I would say I'm optimistic. I think that. I think there's probably the pros outweigh the cons a little bit with bringing in Brendan. I think it's good for our momentum and moving forward with what we want to do as a club. I think that, as Willie was saying, I think getting this done earlier rather than later is really good because it gives us makes sure that we're not losing, momentum. We're not losing time that Rangers could be moving forward with their squad. So I think it's good that this has been done early and means that we can move forward.
All right, fair enough. And Steve, yourself, how are you feeling about it all?
No, I feel pretty good. As we said last week, and I know we'll get into it today, we're in a pretty good place as a club. We've got on the back of a treble. We've got the squad largely retained with long contracts. We've got a quality squad compared to when Brendan last came in. And we've got a quality coach, So I actually feel pretty good. I absolutely recognise there's a bit of healing to do between some of the support and Brendan. And I actually hope that happens sooner rather than later. But yeah, I feel pretty good actually.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm pretty excited. As anybody who listens to this podcast will know, I've pretty much been on board the Brendan bus for a while now. I don't really share a lot of people's views on the way he left Celtic, so that's the kind of place I'm coming to it from. So I firmly believe he is the best manager that's available to us at the moment. He's elite level for me. He's coming into a club, as you say, Steve, with an existing winning squad, a winning culture. And we'll talk a little bit more about the backroom team in a short while. But he's coming into continuity, which he never had before. He came in before to a team that was kind of struggling, a club that was, lacking in sports science, lacking in data analytics. But those sort of things are all in place now. And there's a recruitment team which seems to be working well away in the background there. So hopefully he can plug into all that and we can hit the ground running. So for me, I was delighted and I'm really happy that it's been put to bed pretty quickly, as you said, Willie, because the last thing we needed was it dragging on for weeks and weeks into the summer. Now he's here. We can get to work on the job of getting signings in and getting tooled up for the Champions League next year. So welcome everybody joining us on the YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're listening on the audio, please subscribe and follow us on wherever you get your audio podcasts. If you want to join the conversation after the show, please reach out to us on our social media channels. We're on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. And the handles are on the top of the screen and in the episode notes. So we'll just move on and talk about last night. So I think it came out about 8 p.m. Sydney time last night, which is probably about 11 o'clock in the morning in the UK. firstly announced to the stock exchange, and that put to bed a kind of always been a little bit of a myth among Celtic fans that we have to announce everything to the stock exchange first. Well, we actually do, obviously, because it was literally minutes before the official announcement came out on the Celtic social media team. So clearly we do need to announce it to the stock exchange first. So the announcement came out on the Celtic social medias, and there was a number of statements issued as part of that. The first one came from Brendan Rodgers himself, and he said, "I'm really delighted to return to Celtic, and I'm hugely excited by this great opportunity. When I was given the privilege of being asked to join the club again, it was a very simple decision for me and my family. We have enjoyed some great times at Celtic before, and this will be my goal again, to deliver good football, ensure we have a team we all love to watch, and ultimately bring more success to our fans. Ange has done some brilliant work across the last 2 years, and I'll be doing all I can to maintain Celtic's momentum as we face into all our domestic and European challenges. We have a hugely impressive and talented group of players and staff at the club, and I'm really looking forward to meeting up with them all and then getting straight down to work. I wanted John to be with me as we move forward. He's a very talented coach, someone I know well and respect, and will be very important to myself and our players. The club is in fantastic condition at all levels, and I'd like to thank the board for putting their trust in me to take the team forward. We will work very closely together as we strive to bring that success to our supporters. Let's get to work." So there's going to be a further few statements from Michael Nicholson, from Peter Lawwell, which clearly wasn't written by Peter Lawwell. They've clearly got him locked in a cupboard somewhere. By Dermot Desmond himself. So I won't read through all of them. It was the same sort of guff about, Brendan's great, we're just lucky to have him and all that. So I'll go to yourself first, Steve. Comments on Brendan's opening gambit to the support there? Anything surprising, or is it just all?
No, I mean, just drilling into it a little bit more detail. The fact that he's keeping John Kennedy, I think, is interesting, because there was the debate about Kennedy joining Ange down at Spurs. I don't know whether that leaves no room for Chris Davies or not, because I was quite impressed with Chris Davies when they were here last time. And it feels like there's a recognition that, we've kind of moved on from where Brendan joined last time, but there's more work to do around the infrastructure, which is something we were all kind of harping on a bit about last time. So, yeah, I mean, it's good. It feels like we're, dare I say it, building from a position of strength, which, let's be honest, as a club, we're not famous for doing. We're normally, we reach a pinnacle, on the way to, the next thing, and then we shoot ourselves in the foot somehow, But this feels like it's a really good appointment. I do think there needs to be some contrition shown at some point, and it'll be really interesting to see how Brendan does that, because I don't think that's a natural emotion for him. And yeah, I don't know. We'll see, but it's exciting. Let's be honest, it's exciting, And I know all of us who knew Ange were equally excited when Ange got the gig, and we were proven to be correct, which is always a great feeling. But no, it feels similar to that. It feels like we're on the cusp of maybe the next springboard, So, yeah, exciting.
Yeah, I'll go to you next, Mac. Let's get to work. Is that the new "we never stop"? You reckon? Think that's going to be the sort of the Brendan Rodgers slogan moving forward?
There was a fair bit of irony around. I think before it was "In Ange We Trust" for this season, and that sort of didn't play out as well as we would have liked. As much as we, still have warm feelings for Ange moving forward. I think overall. I think, I think that might be our new tagline. But I think if you look at the messages that they were putting out there, it sounded like a lot of it was about momentum for the future, and then looking towards things like the Champions League moving forwards in Europe. So I think that's really what we want to hear at the moment. We want to hear that Ange over the last couple of years has set up this squad. We have a lot of young coming through players that have shown that they've got talent. So I guess we want to push it to the next level and see where we can go from here. I think just being successful in Scotland isn't really what we want over the next few years. We want to see some headway moving into Europe. So the messages that that seem to be putting out were in line with that, and that's good to hear.
And Willie, yourself, anything significant in the statements that were issued by Rodgers or Peter Lawwell, Michael Nicholson, or Dermot Desmond? Anything you picked up on?
I think like when he says he will do all he can to maintain the momentum, that's good to hear, because we did have a lot of forward momentum under Ange, taking the club from a really sort of horrible place we were at after Lennon left, turned it all around and got us back going again. So if he's going to prepare to put the work in to keep that going, then I'm happy for that to happen.
Yeah, I should definitely second that. So I'll just bring up a couple of comments just to get some other people's opinions on board. And Andrew Galeas, one of our regular contributors, saying here, keeping the coaching staff together is important. And I think that is absolutely correct. And to give us with some forward momentum and carry on with what the good work that Ange was carrying out. Mahesh is jumping in to tell us how Leicester got relegated with Maddison, Nacho, Tielemans and Dewsbury Hall in the squad beggars belief. Leicester squad better than Newcastle. Celtic inheriting Leicester's problems. So we'll move on in the next section to talk about maybe some pros and cons from Rodgers' appointment. So that might be captured there. And Mickey Moynihan says, I just hope everyone can move on and get behind this appointment. Which one of us hadn't made a mistake in life and needed a second chance? Well, I know I've never made any mistakes, but I don't know about anyone else, you know. So.
Very philosophical, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's a quite good one there. I like that one. Yeah. All right, so we'll move on. And as I say, we'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons of appointing Brendan Rodgers. My personal opinion is that there's a lot more pros than cons. But I understand that probably some people in the support might not share that. So I'm going to go around each one of you and ask for like a pro first, and then I might grab a con from you, and multiple if you want. So I'll go to you first, Mac. What's like a pro for hiring Brendan Rodgers as manager?
I think for me, a really important one moving forward was I don't want to go backwards from where we are, and I think that overall, Brendan Rodgers has had a reputation for doing attacking-based football. He's quite used to having four at the back, and then I think he's ones that he talked about it when he was last at Leicester, which was like obviously his last appointment. Where he said he was most comfortable with a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3. But I guess the point is it's attacking-based football, and so I think that's a real positive of Brendan moving forward, because if we went to play a defensive style of game, we'd have to retrain all of our players to do that style, and I don't think that will end up well. And looking at clubs that Ange has moved on from in the past, when he's set up a team, it seems to go better when the next coach that comes in is an attacking based coach. So I think that's a positive.
And yourself, Willie, what's the sort of main pro for you in hiring Brendan Rodgers?
I think, as I said earlier, we've got an elite level manager coming in, and what he's going to do is he's going to strengthen from an already pretty strong position that we're in, squad-wise. So we've seen before in the past, he came in and he took over Ronnie Dyler's squad. They were pretty low in confidence. There was not a great feel about the place, and he turned them all around. So, yeah, I'm interested to see if he can get some players on to the next level.
Yeah, he's got a good reputation, Steve, for improving players. Guys like Callum McGregor, Kieran Tierney, Scott Brown, all speak really highly of Rodgers' influence on their careers, and it'll be interesting to see how what sort of improvements he can get out of the current squad. So, what would be the major Brendan Rodgers pro for you?
Yeah, so to my mind, I think it's the lower risk option, at least for season one, right? So I know one sequence of season 1, 2, 3 doesn't necessarily define a pattern or whatever, but we looked last week at what Brendan's last time round season 1 was like. Of course, it was invincible. He did, wonderful things. Season 2, to me, there was a real drop off, and then season 3 was, hardly disastrous. We won a treble, but there was a really dramatic drop. And I know we'll talk a little bit more about this, in a moment. But for me, one of the biggest pros is I actually think Brendan presents the lowest risk option for season 1. But on the flip side of that, it feels like we might be missing out on, just one of those exciting wild cards. So I'll be honest, I'm not I'm not very well read on some of these other coaches, but I don't know whether a Knutson was going to be, the guy, or I actually was a little bit intrigued by Muscat, gives, the Australia linkage and whatnot again. But it feels like we might have missed out on, just that excitement of, pulling a diamond out of the rough again. The other con for me is that split in the support. I actually think Ange did a phenomenal job of really pulling together a fairly fractious relationship, between the board and the supporters, and, really got everyone behind, the team. And it just feels like this isn't as natural, I guess, an opportunity for Brendan to do that. I think the North Curve or the Green Brigade have already come out and reissued their, trading immortality for mediocrity, banners that they did. And it just feels like, we could have a bit of a schism in the sport, for a period of time. And I think the other thing I would say, just building on something Max said, I felt a little bit that sometimes Brendan's, at least season 2 and season 3, sometimes it was possession for possession's sake. It didn't feel like we had the same urge to, cut through teams quickly the way Ange's team did. And do you remember that whole thing, where we'd get it to the left back, come back to the centre backs, to the other centre back, to the right back, all the way, and we'd do that in series. And I'm just hoping that we retain, more of the attacking thrust and the I guess the quick cut through, that we saw with Ange's team. So, yeah, sorry, that's a bit of a mishmash of pros and cons there, Steve. But hopefully you can filter them out.
Let me try and untangle that.
Thank you.
So, Willie, we'll pick up on that one from Steve about some of the performances, especially during Brendan's latter stages at the club, where you're right, it did look as if we were keeping the ball for the sake of it, and we had quite a few 1-0 wins and stuff like that. It has been mentioned by various people across social media the last few days, though, that Brendan Rodgers is probably a better manager now than he was then, having spent another 4 years in EPL, having tasted success, having gone up against the very elite managers in the game, which he certainly has it, and he's got success over all of them. So do you think it's fair to say that he's a better manager now than he was in 2019?
He'll be certainly more experienced, but whether he's a better manager or not, time will tell. We can't just sort of say, yes, he's going to definitely be better, because we don't know that for certain. So it's a difficult one to answer. But my suspicion is, yes, he will be a better manager. He's going to have a better starting position from when he was here the last time. I mean, some of the players he had to get rid of in his first few weeks, Carlton Cole, Colin Kazim-Richards, he had a lot of sort of bang average players sitting around there. But then you look at the strength and depth we have to the squad now, it's pretty good. So, and he as we've seen before, he can get players to the next level quite quickly. So here's hoping he'll hit the ground running, but you can never tell, you know what I mean? Sometimes football has a funny way of throwing wild cards in your direction. Things just don't go the way they should. So here's hoping that's not the case.
Yeah, and Mac, he has played a number of different systems at Leicester over the past few years, including inverted fullbacks. So he has shown a bit of fluidity in his formations. Do you think he'll carry that on into his second spell at Celtic?
Yeah, I guess we'll see. We'll see what ends up happening. I think it'll be in his mind at the moment what way he's going to move forward. But one advantage I would say with him is the advantage of ambition. It has its disadvantages, which we've seen, but an advantage of it is he will want to do well. You know, he's going to be throwing everything at it to try and get as good a results as he can to continue on his career. So I think that can be a positive on our side. I say that he's probably tooling up to see what he can do in Europe with the budget that he has, and we are in a good financial position at the moment to allow him to strengthen the squad even further. So I hope that he does that, looks at ways that we can get stronger and then start to be able to perform at that level. Although I understand that our budget is not what some of the big teams are, so we've got to. I think, I think we need to understand that, and then let's see what Brendan can do with it.
Yes, I'm just going to bring up a comment from Mahesh here. I think he's desperate to make a point, so I'll give him the floor for a second. He's saying, how can he be a better manager? Last season was a train wreck. If that gets repeated at Celtic, they lose the league. And I think, it's easy to become fixated on what happened at Leicester last season. But what happened the previous 3 seasons where he did taste success down there? He had 2 top 5 finishes, and certainly in one of the seasons, he had a chance of finishing top 4 right up to the last day. So that would have qualified them for the Champions League. He also won an FA Cup, I think the first one in their history, if I'm not mistaken. And he brought, great success to Leicester. So I don't think we should be fixating on what happened in his final season there. There was an issue with finances. The company which owned Leicester is a company called King Power, who run duty-free shops all over the world, a Thailand-based company. And of course, during COVID, their business just disappeared down the plug hole completely. So there was a finance problem there. And I'm sure, Brendan made mistakes like every manager does. And there's not a manager out there that doesn't have at least 1 or 2 mistakes in their portfolio. Even guys like Pep Guardiola failed to win the Champions League at Bayern. It took him a decade to win it at Man City. So there's not a manager out there without a failure on the resume somewhere. But I'll go to you, Steve. Do you think that's fair comment that we shouldn't really be fixating on what happened last season at Leicester?
I'm certainly not fixated, I mean, we shouldn't ignore it, but equally, these things need to be taken in context. And I mean, I do think, I do think Brendan, and I know we'll touch on this in a moment, Brendan does feel like a 1 or 2 season and done type thing. I think he struggles a bit in that season 3, or when relationships start to get a bit fractious. And I actually think managers' shelf lives are getting shorter as well. I think it feels like a lot of the power sits with the players now, and they maybe get tired of hearing the same voice after 2 seasons anyway. So I actually don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think there's lessons to learn from last year at Leicester, but I don't think we should necessarily let it cast a complete shadow over what we're trying to do.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of other pros that I've listed down here. The pros that I had where, he's an elite level manager. We've touched on that. He's experienced in the EPL with runs on the board and trophies. A couple of years ago, he was been mentioned as a possible successor to Pep Guardiola. And it's funny that, Brendan's quite often gets accused of being disloyal, particularly to Celtic, but probably his loyalty to Leicester cost him a much bigger job. I think he probably stayed there a season too long when the financial issues started to bubble to the surface. Because he was being mentioned as probably being the best sort of British-based manager around. And it's just like the last season at Leicester that caused that to tail off. I think, in my opinion, he's a better manager than Ange. He's also quite significantly younger, and he knows the Scottish game inside and out. So I'll go to you, Willie. Anything you disagree with there?
Nah, it's hard to disagree with you. I think knowing the Scottish League inside out could be a con as well. It could be a limitation. He could get bored with it quite quickly, as he like a lot of managers. Like people will say, you don't leave Celtic, you leave the Scottish football because it just bores you, and you want to try and prove yourself elsewhere. And I think that could be seen as a limitation. Like so. Other than that, I do sort of agree with you. I mean, some people say you're only as good as your last job, and yeah, you got to look at last season at Leicester, but were Leicester overachieving where they were, sitting there fifth in the Premier League? Is that sort of an overachievement for them? Well, they won it a couple of seasons before that, but that was a major overachievement. Like, but for me, they're a mid-table team, and every now and again they're going to flirt with relegation, and sometimes you just get sucked into that. So, yeah.
Yeah, so some of the cons that I've listed down here, one is potential recruitment concerns. Certainly his recruitment record was patchy at best. The last time he was at Celtic, we had a bit of a chat about that last week, and some of the names that we were dredging up were pretty horrific. So yeah, recruitment. I think that will probably be smoothed out a bit by the way the club's moved on. I do think we've got better recruitment structures in the background. I like what Mark Lawwell's doing, and I think Michael Nicholson's doing a good job as CEO. So that's maybe slight of a less of a concern. The other one I had listed was his European record at Celtic. And as we've mentioned, it's been pretty front and centre of all the statements coming out that Brendan's here to try and put Celtic back on the map in a European sense. So do we have any concerns on that front, Steve? Or do you think that, that there's any mitigation for some of the things that went against him the last time during European campaigns?
I mean, look, the initial noises are positive, right? So we've been talking on this pod for quite a few weeks now, probably months now, that, just trying to be marginally better than Rangers is actually limiting us. We need to be looking further afield. We need to be looking up and aspiring to, achieve more rather than looking down and making sure we're, 2 points ahead of the Rangers or whatever. And to me, a lot of what came out in the press over the last week, and let's be honest, Celtic have been managing the press talk over the last week in preparation for Monday's announcement. But a lot of that talk has been about aspiring upwards and actually building infrastructure towards that. Does that translate to, avoiding absolute gubbings in season one? I don't know. Let's be honest. There's a big gap between us as a top four club and some of the super elite European forces these days. I actually, in some ways, I loved the way we played in Europe last year. I know we weren't successful, I get that, but we had a consistency, we had a bit of backbone about us. We actually went at teams, and fine, there's no trophy for 50 minutes against Real Madrid. That doesn't get us anything, but it felt like we had won a bit of pride back as well. So to my mind, if we can approach Europe coming up, and we know we don't have the qualifiers, we're straight into it, and a lot will depend on the draw. Let's be very, very clear. it's a pretty broad spectrum you can draw. But I think if we can actually take a bit of, what am I trying to say? A bit of, taking our domestic approach into Europe, I wouldn't be averse to that. And last time round, Brendan got criticised for, not being more pragmatic in Europe. We talked about the PSG games, where we got absolutely thumped. But to me, I don't want pragmatic. I don't actually want us to be, changing, and just trying to get by. I'd rather we actually went at teams and, it's risk reward. If you're, you run the risk of getting a gubbing. I get that, or losing heavily, or whatever you want to sit in the spectrum. But equally, you also run the possibility of actually getting something out of it as well. So, speaking personally, I think he's probably learned quite a lot through that process. He's everything you read about him, he's quite an egotistical individual. So to my mind, and if you want to turn that to a positive, he will be looking towards Europe and thinking, right, how do we actually make a mark? That would be something I didn't do last time, something Ange didn't do in between, and here's my opportunity to address that. So, fingers crossed.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I was listening to the Huddle Breakdown podcast this week, and Juco James was doing a bit about how he compared the gubbings that we got from Barcelona and PSG under Brendan Rodgers to the 5-1 tanking we got at the Bernabeu last year with Ange. And he basically said, as far as the data is concerned and the XG and all that stuff, and I'm not an expert on this stuff, so I defer to what Juco James was saying. He was saying the defeat to Real Madrid last year was worse than any of the defeats that Rodgers suffered, any of the heavy defeats he suffered, because in his reasoning was, Barcelona, it was peak Messi, it was peak Neymar, PSG was peak Mbappe, and they basically scored everything they got a chance to score. Whereas Madrid last year, the data suggested that if they had, for instance, if Benzema had been fit, they could have scored 7 or 8 easily on us. Yeah. So it was an interesting analysis. I've never thought about it that way before, but it was interesting to see what the data actually said.
Just a really quick one on that, Stephen. So from a defensive perspective, I would probably agree, or the much of a muchness, PSG took every chance they could. Real Madrid left a lot on the table, as it were. But from an attacking perspective, it was completely different. We had I don't have it in front of me now, but we had more big chances and big chances missed than, so many of our peers. I think we were almost performing like a pot 2 team in terms of attacking, creating chances, etc. And Patrick's just made a comment in the comments on the YouTube around, Kyogo being missing, certainly didn't help. And, I don't know if you remember, but Dyson Maeda, missing that opportunity that came right across his body. We can all probably pick out 3 or 4. So I'd say from a defensive perspective, it was pretty similar, much of a muchness. But from an attacking perspective, we created so much more in Ange's season 2 than we did, I'd argue, in Brendan's campaigns. Might be wrong, but that's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Mahesh has commented again that he disagrees with Juco James completely. Scoreline flattered Madrid. The non-penalty net XG home and away against him is around 1.6. So, I'm not going to argue for or against that. You can take that up with Juco James, I'm sure. So I'll go to you next, Mac. Are you excited to see what Rodgers can deliver in Europe next year, or are you a little bit nervous?
No, I'm not nervous. I think one thing we learned from when we played that game, do you remember in the Europa League we played against Bodo Glimt and had this battle with them? It was a challenging one for us because our team was the first year that Ange had taken over, and we were still starting out and learning how to play together in that way. And I think performing in Europe, it's a process. So I think if you're an attacking club and you attack in a certain way and you continue that from manager to manager, over time it becomes really ingrained in the club. And the other thing, one thing that Ange did with the club, which I think is a good thing, is we saw better alignment with the B team, with our main team. We might not have seen the players coming through yet, but I think over time that's going to be happening. And I think, and those players will know that how to play that attacking style from fairly early on in their career. And as that continues through, that may give us some more performances in Europe. Will we get some beatings? Maybe. I think if you do an attacking style and you play 4 at the back and don't try and defend everything, then you probably will get beaten sometimes. But I think we will score more goals, and hopefully over time we can build more within Europe.
All right, so just move on to the next thing I wanted to mention. So Brendan signed a 3-year contract. There's a few rumours bouncing around that it might be a 5-year contract. So I'll go to you, Willie. Anything to read into the fact it was 3 years and not 5, and also and not the normal 1-year rolling contract that we usually give to managers?
I think the 3-year deal for me is the best possible deal we could have given him. It means he will probably be around for at least 2 seasons, and then if he does decide to sort of pack his bags and go after that, we still have that cushion there behind him that he's got a year left on his deal, and it will be well compensated if he is to go. If he goes after a year, we'll probably be even better compensated. So with the 5-year, I had a bad vibe about the 5-year. If say the footballing gods throw you a bad hand and he has a bad season for the first season, you might want to turn around and say, like, sorry Brendan, this isn't working, it's time to go. You've got a big amount of money to pay out, because he is now our second time round he's been the highest paid manager in our history. Was it 2.5 to 3 million a year? That's a lot of money to pay out. So for me, 3 years is probably right about on the money. And as for the 1-year rolling contract, he's proved himself in Scotland. He doesn't deserve a deal like that. I mean, if Ange came in, we didn't know who Ange was, we didn't know what he was about. You gave him a year's rolling contract, it sort of protected us. It gave him the option too, you know what I mean? If it didn't work out, you could get rid of him after a year. People like Neil Lennon, when he first came in, that's the sort of deal you give them. People like Ronnie Dyler, you know what I mean? After a year, this isn't working, we'll just call it a day at that. But Rodgers has proved himself in Scotland over the time, so yeah, I think a 3-year deal is about right for me.
Yeah, I'll put this one to you, Steve. There's been a few concerns expressed about Rodgers running away again in the middle of his contract. But my view on this is, if he really wanted a job in the EPL, I think his stock's high enough just now that he would get one. When you consider there was, almost half the teams in the EPL sacked their manager last year. If he just hung around, stayed out of work, the first manager to get sacked next year, he would have probably been the next cab off the rank for that job. So I'm not really sharing the same concerns that some people are about him being desperate to run away. Obviously, you can never tell what the circumstances are going to be, and as Rodgers has said himself a number of times, it's all about timing. But what about yourself? Do you think the 3-year commitment by Brendan and the club to Brendan is significant?
I think it strikes a good balance to Willie's point. When you said, are you worried about him, leaving in the middle of I thought you were going to say in the middle of the night rather than in the middle of the season. Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, but to some degree, how best to put this, if we've got a manager that no one else is courting, then that probably tells you that we've got a manager that's pretty middle of the road. So in the same vein as we want our players to be wanted by other clubs. I'm not saying we want them to move necessarily. We want to be in control of that, but you kind of want your manager to be courted and to be wanted by other clubs as well. I personally don't think the next step for Rodgers will be back to the EPL. I think he's always had aspirations about managing in Spain. He's learning the language. He's got some connections out there. I think he could be more looking towards that market. I know you're saying he would probably be considered, for the first sizable EPL job that comes up, but I think the list of managers that would be considered for all those jobs is quite large now. I think there's the perennial, Allardyces and, whatnots. And then you get the Graham Potters and, there's probably realistically, 9 to 10 managers that we could reel off fairly quickly, that are available at any point in time. And, I would probably think he would just be one of those. So I think he, if I'm being cynical, he probably looks at Celtic as an opportunity to rebuild his stock. He's taken a bit of a, beating, with the Leicester performance in that last season. I know we've covered that already, but he's probably viewing it as an opportunity to rebuild that stock and get ready for the next move. I personally think that next move will probably be, 2 seasons in. I can't see him lasting the full 3 seasons. I wouldn't be surprised if it was Spain rather than England.
Yeah, I take your point, Steve. I'm not really convinced though about that notion that he's looking at a 2-year span for his time at Celtic. I get the notion that he does, and if you listen to the interviews he's gave down through the years, he's been fairly consistent about the fact that he's a Celtic fan and he's got Celtic in his heart. And there's been a few of those interviews bouncing around the social media in the last few days, and I've been listening to a few of them, and it is quite clear that he has always felt as if he had unfinished business at Celtic, and I'm coming round to the opinion now that he does see himself as wanting to leave a legacy here, in terms of a lasting impact on the club, rather than to be remembered as a guy who disappeared in the middle of the night, as you say. So what's your take on that, Mac? Do you think Brendan's got his eye on a legacy, or as Steve says, Jinky's just looking for a leg up for his career? to paraphrase Steve.
Don't you put words in my mouth.
Why did Steve say that? Horrible.
Rewind take, please.
Typical Steve.
Yeah. I think it's probably it's somewhere in the middle. It's probably a bit of both. I think he is an ambitious manager. I think he's had a tough time it's not an easy position to be a manager anywhere, particularly in the English Premier League. I don't know if you guys heard about Bournemouth getting rid of a successful manager that just kept them up last year. I mean, You get done even if you were successful. So I think it is a chance to rebuild his stock but I also look, I'm not as I understand that how he left the first time probably wasn't the way that he would have, that it didn't end up well for anyone involved. And I definitely can understand people being frustrated and concerned that happened. But I also come from the perspective that just because someone moves on to another job in their career doesn't necessarily mean the time that they spent in that club in the past was not important to them, or that they didn't care about what they were doing. So I think he probably does have a good affinity with Celtic, and as other managers in the past have. Does that mean that, I think people have to, is it likely to move on in over time? I think probably it will be, but at least we'll be moving forward with our project at Celtic of what we want to do, which is continuing to build. So that's okay. I think as long as but I would say the club should have a list of possible managers that follow that the same, are aligned with what we want to do, and always have that list available and can constantly be renewing it, just so we are ready if that does happen at some point.
All right, what about yourself, Willie? Do you think Brendan's eyeing an early exit, or do you think he's sort of trying to build something there?
Is he eyeing an early exit? Past history shows.
Spit it out, mate.
Past history shows that he could just be here to try and rebuild his reputation. Leicester's gone down. Could he be here just to try to get his reputation back up a wee bit more? I don't think any of the top 5 or 6 clubs in England will look at him at this moment in time. So you could say this season he'll definitely be here. But if he does a really good job, gets another treble, say we get 3rd in the Champions League and get another couple of games in the Europa League, his stock will go high again, and then maybe a bigger English team will come looking. So I wouldn't rule him out going back down. I think he might stay for 2 years this time. I hope he does, because we seem to be putting a lot of backing into him. We're giving him a lot of money. We're giving him a lot of we're giving him that sort of freedom with the signings and stuff like that. So I kind of hope he will show a little bit back in return this time, and not sort of pack his bags and do a midnight flip like he did the last time.
Yeah, I get. Sorry, back. How you go?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think Steve, we were going to make the same point. I agree. But I think there's a good chance he will stay for a couple of years. I think he does want to build something. I think, and I do probably expect this time he won't want to leave like he did last time. I don't think he will want to leave the club with all the fans angry at him. I don't think that's good for him in the long run for his reputation. Or for anyone really, for us as well. So what do you think, Steve? Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think, when he left the last time, you can't ignore the dynamic at the club at the time. He'd almost completely fallen out completely with his direct boss, who was Peter Lawwell. By all reports, they were barely on talking terms. So that seems to have been repaired now. And I believe that if we keep giving him the support that he needs and keep giving him what he wants, just the way we gave Ange almost everything he wanted, I think he might. Sorry to paraphrase Ange. I think he might be around a bit longer than we think.
No, you might be surprised at how long I'm around.
Yeah. I didn't mean that to sound like an Ange comparison, but anyway, all right. Okay, so we'll just move on. So most of the smart money is that this is a Dermot Desmond appointment, with the Lawwells, both Mark and Peter being more leaning towards Enzo Maresca due to the City Group connections. Now, I assume Rodgers has received assurances that everyone is on board behind him. But do you think there's any potential for a schism in the club? I'll go to you first, Willie, with the fact that Brendan just seems to be pulling the strings here to get Rodgers across the line.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the previous relationship he had with Peter Lawwell, it broke down to the extent I don't think they were even talking anymore. Brendan Rodgers was giving him a list of players he wanted to sign, and then people like Marian Shved were turning up for training, and he was like, I don't need any more wingers, he's coming out. So you know that is in the background. So Dermot Desmond's obviously overruled Peter Lawwell somewhere along the line very early into this hunt, wherever it started, after Ange handed his notice in to say, look, I'm off to Tottenham. It would be prudent to think that Dermot's just turned and says, no, we're going for Brendan, and that's it, and Peter Lawwell has to just sort of suck it up and get on with it. Is that going to cause a division in the camp? Well, time will tell. You would kind of think that it might. Is Peter Lawwell going to be happy that his nose is out of joint, and he likes his own way the whole time? So yeah, I do think it might cause a bit of ruction up there. I mean, Mark Lawwell's there too. That's Peter's boy, and have they had little wee talks about, can we get another sort of City Group guy in there, and has that made that sort of partnership we kind of have with the City Group, has that kind of put their noses out of joint somewhere along the line? They're all sort of skullduggery goes on at that level, so who knows? But we'll sort of play out as the season goes on. You will see that sort of thing. Any sort of situations will arise will be pretty quickly picked up by the press.
Yeah, so Steve, I think with Peter Lawwell now being a chairman rather than the CEO, he really shouldn't have any involvement in the day-to-day running of the club. The most important relationship now should be between Brendan Rodgers and Michael Nicholson and Mark Lawwell, obviously. Now, that seems to have went okay with Ange, and we can only really hope that lessons have been learned from the past, and that Lawwell's new role as a non-executive chairman basically will keep his nose out of it. Are you quite confident that will be the case?
I'd like to think so. I mean, let's be really honest. If Peter Lawwell, his role is managing the board, or chairing the board rather, and managing stakeholders up and out, so UEFA's in this world, etc. Then that's enough of a role for most people. I think Nicholson seems to have been quietly effective, would be how I'd characterize him. He's not a flashy CEO, but I'm not sure you necessarily always want a flashy CEO in a football club context, where you've got the front-facing manager and so sometimes a director of football that, gets some of the press as well. The reality is CEO role is probably a little bit more reserved than, in other businesses. Yeah, I'd like to think so. I mean, I know, we're second guessing on politics here and personal relationships. I don't know what the dynamic is between Mark Lawwell and Peter Lawwell. I don't know whether, we're all assuming that Mark would align to Peter. I genuinely don't know what their relationship is, or their, whether they would constructively challenge one another or whatever, So we're all second guessing it. But what I will say is, I don't think Dermot is above stepping in and knocking some heads together if he ever feels the need to. I guess time will tell. But I did like Willie's use of the word skullduggery. It's it's far too few used word. So good use of skullduggery, Willie. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah. So I'll just move on to talk about the next thing. So we touched on this a little bit earlier about the reaction of some of the Celtic support to Brendan's arrival. And as you mentioned, Steve, there was a tweet come out on the North Curve account, which I think is the same thing as the Green Brigade. I'm not sure, where they reposted their banner from the game after Brendan left the last time. And it's really, to be honest, I think it's been met with a lot of sort of, disagreement among the support. And I noticed the 20-minute Tims had a poll up last week, I think, where they polled, and there was something like 10,000 people responded to this poll, and it was 80% were in favour of, Brendan Rodgers coming back as manager. So I'll put this one to you, Mac. Do you think the Green Brigade are on the wrong side of this here? And, do we hope that this is just maybe a one-off, a little bit of sabre rattling by them?
The North Curve, I think.
The North Curve.
Sorry, Steve. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't.
Yes, I think it's the same thing. Error. The North Curve and the Green Brigade. So I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I know the North Curve are an important fan base. I think, look, the biggest thing for me is I think it's important that people understand that they do have the right to feel how they want to feel. And I think that will be important when Brendan Rodgers, if he does have press conferences in the near future, just that he understands that some people were hurt by what happened. But on the other side, I think moving forward, we always have to be united with each other in terms of supporting the team and the people that, the players and team that we support. So I guess it's okay for people to feel that, and then moving forward, let's get together and try and get as much success as we can, as we always do. So yeah, look, I understand their feelings.
Yeah, I think it's fair enough. I'm not going to criticise anyone for holding those views. It was fairly widely spread at the time. Personally, I do hope we can move beyond the sort of rat references to Law. Sorry, to Brendan. I think that's something that's really disrespectful to a Celtic manager, as well as being a little bit infantile and puerile. So hopefully the grown-ups are now back in charge of the narrative, and we can move beyond that sort of rhetoric.
Steve, are we limiting this section to just the Celtic fans' reaction, or can we include any well-known Rangers fans' reactions that may or may not be?
I'll touch on that in a minute, Steve. I just wanted to. We're kind of running out of time a bit, but I just wanted to, and I'll put this one to you, Willie. So we've got a media conference coming up later this week, where Brendan will address the media. What are you hoping that he says, and what do you think he's going to say?
I would hope he would come out and sort of say, "Look, I'm sorry. I took the choice that was best for me, and I know it hurt you, but could come out and say I'm sorry." I don't think he will. I think he'll just come out and talk business. I don't think he'll try and address the situation straight away. I think he'll have sort of people there to advise him on how to sort of deal with the situation. I honestly don't know how he's going to react to it. I'm intrigued to see. I said earlier on, I'm intrigued to see how this goes, because I don't know how it's going to go. And like you said, some of the fans, it's not for us to judge how they they feel. You know what I mean? How they condone, whether we condone it or condemn it. It's up to them how they feel. Some were hurt the last time. I was hurt the last time when he left. I'm on board with this decision to take him back as manager, but yeah, there will be that trust issue there in the background with me with him, like so. And I hear a lot of people saying, look, just if you take the emotion out of it, then you can try and look at it in a rational sort of way. Like if you take the emotion out of it, for me, you kind of lose that sort of edge that you have as a Celtic fan, you know. And if you do take the emotion out, you end up like one of those guys at the Champions League final who sat in his seat at the 90th minute, giving it that, not even standing up to sort of cheer his team. Like I say, it's going to be interesting. It certainly will be. I think it's Friday it's booked in for, so it will definitely be interesting to see. Like,
so Steve, do you think he needs to say sorry?
Sorry, what is it? Sorry is the sorry is the hardest word to say, or whatever it is. Look, I think he needs to recognise it. You know, let's be honest, the Scottish press are baying at the opportunity to bring it up, and you know, if he doesn't get on the front foot and tackle it head on, you know, you've already got Tom English. You know, I wouldn't say what I think of Tom English, but you know, it's kind of sniping from the corners already about how, you know, it's a tougher Rangers that you've got this time round, and you know, actually, was he even really that successful? You know, when you compare him to, you know, and all this kind of nonsense. You know, so you've already got the Scottish press building up to, you know, to it. So I think Rodgers needs to get on the front foot. You know, from my perspective as a fan, you know, I think I would appreciate it. At least recognise it. You know, he doesn't need to come out and, you know, do the whole mea culpa, full-blown apology, but at least recognise it and talk about it. You know, because frankly, if he doesn't, it's just going to keep coming up and keep coming up. But then draw a line under it and move on. And I think we've all said this now. It's not for us or anyone at the club to tell any of the fans how they should feel. At the end of the day, we've got a lot of fans that pay a lot of money, you know, to support the club and have done over, you know, COVID years and, you know, well beyond that. You know, frankly, you know, a lot of people, their lives revolve around the club, you know, and it'd be completely inappropriate for the club to turn around and tell anyone else to, you know, as to how they should feel about a club appointment or otherwise. So, you know, you earn trust, you know, rather than get it forced upon you. And I think it's up to not just Brendan, it's up to Brendan. Oh God, listen to me with all my first name references, Brendan, Peter and Mark and the crew, Michael, you know, to actually demonstrate and earn back some of that trust, in my mind.
Yes, I'll just bring up a comment from Pete McGee. Brendan doesn't owe anyone an apology unless or until the board stand up and take responsibility for causing him to leave the way he did, which is a fair point, I think. Yeah. And also Kaiser HTTC says, I think there is no need to apologise. We can all see him leaving and pressed a change on the board as far as backing managers. Look at the way they were hands off with Angie's. Lessons were learned on both sides, which I think is a very good point as well. So, Mac, are you expecting Brendan to say sorry at his media conference?
No, but I do. I think what Steve was saying is right. I think it's just acknowledging what has happened, and that some people will feel like that, and that. But I think honestly, the big thing that will fix these issues, success makes everyone happy. You know, work hard, Sure, if you are contrite about what you did, work hard, get the team running, and let's have more success even than we had this year. Let's go for the next one. Let's go for the quadruple, I say.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Are you saying Brendan's here for 10 in a row, or...
Why not? Well, that would be a legacy, wouldn't it?
He is risen. Yeah, so I don't think he's going to say sorry. I think he'll dance around the issue a little bit, Brendan Rodgers style. But I think if I'll tell you this: if Brendan Rodgers says sorry and uses the word sorry, I will do the Tuesday crew next week in the nude. There you go.
Well,
How do you like
Can we
that
just
one?
clarify?
We'll look forward to that. I guess.
No, hang on. This needs a bit of definition. So, just to be clear, can we get up the thesaurus definition for sorry? Because if he
it's going
says,
to be-
I apologise, or I'm contrite about, not that
It's
I'm
going to be-
encouraging, not that I want to see Stephen in the nude for next week's pod, but you know,
we
you have to be
can
clear on the
arrange that.
definition.
We can arrange that privately, Steve. So yeah, as we mentioned before, we'll just touch on quickly before we go the reaction of the Rangers fans to the news that Brendan's came back, and one Rangers fan in particular who's an official media partner of Rangers, who equated today or last night in a post on Follow. He equated Brendan coming back and the way I think Dermot Desmond and Peter Lawwell have treated the Celtic fans with prison gang rape. Have I got that right?
Well, you've got it as accurate as he depicted it, yes. I mean, that is a hot take, you know, but you know you've hit the extremities.
Depends how warm the shower is overall, doesn't it?
Yeah, you know you've hit the extremities when the rest of Follow are calling you out and saying, "Oh, Mark, I think that's a weird one."
Yeah. Did you see that one, Willie? Were you deeply disturbed as I was?
I was just killing myself laughing at it, like, you know what I mean? It's just like, oh my God, just when you think they couldn't sink any lower, they come out with this, and even their own fans are just trying to distance themselves from them. It's just, it got me. It took me a while to go through all the comments. I kind of read it backwards. I'm reading what the guys were saying, and then I finally get to the crux of it. I'm like, oh wow, hang on a second here. Is this guy for real? Like, you know what I mean? I just couldn't believe what I was reading. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like, oh. The banter years, they just took a wee holiday when COVID came around, didn't they? Like, they just haven't
did
gone
for
much.
sure.
Yeah.
They absolutely did. So yeah, we'll let that one go for now, and we're over the hour, so we'll probably just draw this one to a close. So any final thoughts, Willie, before we go?
Just because it's winter doesn't mean men can wear leggings under their shorts. And if you're going to do it, don't wear white socks. Fucking hell, sort yourself out, man. I saw that at work today, and I was embarrassed for the guy. Like, I was just standing there staring, just in disbelief. Like, I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. Like, so I don't know, is that a trend in Australia in the winter? But in New Zealand, I just don't bother. Like, just save yourself the embarrassment. Buy a pair of trousers.
I think that's an important message moving forward. We'll need it. It's going to be a chilly week apparently. So yeah, watch out, guys.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
And what about yourself, Mac? Any final thoughts?
Look, I think overall it's probably a good appointment. I guess the important thing from here is that we keep on moving forward as a club, and that we benefit from, I guess, the good parts of Ange Postecoglou's reign. Things like looking at our recruitment and making sure that our recruitment from Asia continues to be something that's part of our club. And I think the other benefit of it was also just the relationships that the club built with Asia and Australia as well. So I'd love to see under Brendan Rodgers that continue on, and something that the club, because they've done the hard yards, they've got a relationship. So if they keep on building it, that's a positive.
All right, Steve, any final thoughts for us?
Just super excited. You know, we go again. You know, I keep saying this, we're in a great position, you know, and we've just brought in a top class coach, manager. You know, and I hear Willie's warning us around, you know, football does throw curveballs every now and then, but it feels like we're in a good position. And, you know, if we can maximize that, you know, happy days, salad days, happy salad days.
Yes. Yeah, so moving on from that swiftly. So yeah, same for me, really exciting times. So strap yourselves in. It's going to be a wild ride with Brendan in charge. So thanks everyone who joined us tonight. Thanks for leaving your comments. Don't forget to tune in tomorrow to the Wednesday show, and don't forget to pick up the Monday weekend review show in your podcast app. And with that, I'll say good night and hail, hail.
Hail, hail.
Cheers, everyone.